The billionaire space race is set to blast off this weekend. But are the aspiring astronauts ready for space travel? We'll ask a real astronaut what he thinks. Plus, there are some odd foods out there, but is calling them exotic offensive to those who eat them regularly? The response when one food writer said yes. And new studies show COVID-19 doesn't have serious impact on kids' health. So should masks still be mandatory in schools? We'll talk to a parent and a doctor just ahead. The Donlon Report starts right now. Good evening, happy Friday. It may be summer, but the CDC is thinking about the upcoming school year. The agency released new guidelines today aimed at getting schools back to in-person learning, even in places where COVID cases are rising. Students and teachers who are fully vaccinated do not have to wear masks this fall. That's the headline. As for those too young to get the shot, the CDC is still recommending the mitigation factors we're all familiar with: social distancing, hand washing, thorough cleaning, and of course, still wearing masks. The agency is also urging school communities to get the vaccine, saying now is the time. Keep in mind, it takes 5 weeks to get fully vaccinated, so if you got your first shot today and the second one on July 30th, you wouldn't be fully covered until mid-August, which is just before the school year starts in most areas. And there's also this development. New studies find that when it comes to children, the risk of death or serious illness from COVID-19 remains extremely low, with more than 99.9% of kids infected surviving, giving parents more to consider in the risk-reward debate over the vaccine. Joining me now, Jennifer Bohr-Cuevas, a licensed clinical social worker and spokesperson for Unmask the Kids New York. It's great to have you with us tonight on a Friday. In the beginning, this was really a matter of protecting the parents and the adults at the school. That was behind a lot of this masking. Where's the line for you on this? Have you always been opposed to it, or is it just now because we're at this point?
I believe that the masks played a role. When the pandemic was happening, the masks were purposeful for protecting us and for protecting our fellow humans. But now that we are out of the pandemic, it is now time for us to really consider unmasking our children, especially in the school environment.
Which is what the CDC said today. So where do we stand right now? Where's your district on this right now? Are they still mandating masks, or just for those who are not vaccinated?
My school district, I live in Huntington, Long Island, and they are mandating masks for in-person learning. So
for everyone?
All children. I'm sorry?
For everyone?
For everyone at this point. They have removed the mask for outdoors and for physical education. However, they're still requiring that mask to be worn indoors, even though the kids are still being socially distanced. However, what will become in the new school year has yet to be seen. And with these new CDC guidelines that have emerged today, I'm not hopeful that the masks, wearing the masks indoors will be removed anytime soon, because the school districts seem to follow the CDC's guidelines.
Wouldn't that mean that they would then for vaccinated students?
They could, but school districts could also have the authority to make universal demands that the masks be worn, just in terms of how hard it may be to know who's vaccinated, or how to enforce the rule of getting vaccinated. So the school districts, the CDC did allow in their new guidance for the schools to continue to mandate that rule.
Have they typically followed, Jennifer, in that district you're in there, the CDC guidelines? In other words, when they dropped it from 6 feet to 3 feet, did they follow that and allow it?
Yes, they did.
So,
however, when there was that confusion over the last month of school, in the month of June, as to whether they should be wearing masks or not, the school districts were all up in arms, especially mine. They were not sure, do we remove the masks? Do we keep the masks? After the guidance was clarified, they put the masks back in place. I bet we all remember that.
Sure. So yeah, you have a son, correct?
I do.
Okay, so is your son vaccinated? And if not, will you get him vaccinated so that he doesn't have to wear a mask?
I'm very concerned about getting my son vaccinated. My son has autism, epilepsy, and a heart condition. And one of the things that they're seeing right now as a side effect of the vaccine is a rare inflammation of the heart that occurs as a side effect of the vaccine.
Sure.
So that's something that I am working on with my cardiologist to see if my son would even be a candidate for the vaccine at this point. However, I think that we're going to see now we're going to closely watch and see if the schools require the vaccine and how parents are going to react to this. I think that they're going to be setting the stage for a showdown at this point.
All right. Jennifer Bohr-Cuevas, licensed clinical social worker and spokesperson for Unmask the Kids New York. Thanks for your time, Jennifer, and stay on the line there because I'm going to ask your question to the doctor we have joining me right now, Dr. Jonathan Baktari, E7Health.com CEO. What do you think? Should she get her son vaccinated, doctor?
Well, if her son has some underlying conditions, I could theoretically see a reason to pause. Even the study out of England shows some of the children who had pre-existing conditions probably, were not ideal candidates. But for most children, we definitely think the benefits outweigh the risk.
We thought we were sort of past this mask debate, doctor, but obviously we're not just yet. Where are you on the new CDC guidelines? What do you think about it for kids in school who are not vaccinated?
I have mixed feelings because the real reason we, asked children to mask was so they wouldn't get infected and infect vulnerable adults.
Right.
If we now assume that most vulnerable adults who want to be protected have been vaccinated, it decreases the rationale for having children who are at low risk, one, for transmitting it and getting serious illness. That decreases that logic.
So there's also a move in Congress on this mask note, doctor, about trying to end the mandate on airplanes. I know Senator Rand Paul has been talking about that. Are you on board with that? Are we ready for that there?
Yeah, there's a lot of studies that look at air ventilation on planes, and they change the air about 16 to 20 times an hour and have a HEPA filter. So unless the airline cabin is parked with the air conditioning not on, it's quite actually an airline cabin is quite safe.
Right. I want to ask you about Pfizer's vaccine, which we got word today, at least the company is saying that they feel like the efficacy is waning, which I take to mean they've looked at this for now, like 7 months now, and I'm sure they're tracking exactly what's happening with antibodies and the people who've got it. They seem to think that they're going to need a booster. The CDC is saying that isn't necessary. A lot of people are confused. What do you make of this and where we are?
Well, I mean, what the answer is today is probably not going to be the answer in 3 months, because we know, for example, one shot of Pfizer's vaccine doesn't really cover you for the Delta variant. That's tipping the scale towards we're probably going to need a booster. If that's changed where we only need if we need 2 shots for the Delta variant, that kind of goes along the line that we're eventually going to need a booster. Probably what they're saying is we don't need it right now, but I know Pfizer is developing a booster which includes very specifically targeting the Delta variant. So that would come in very handy, I would imagine, as time rolls by.
Well, the durability on this thing has been pretty fluid, and we've heard it. It could last for a lifetime, right? I mean, I guess as I look at it from my untrained eye, I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on TV, but it seems to me like we're not going to know because this is all brand new. We're not going to know until we get there, right?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that part of the mixed messaging you get from the CDC is sometimes they make a decision what they think is great for public health versus what's scientifically appropriate for any one person. So I think in their heart of hearts, they probably see a booster coming, but right now they want to make sure everyone gets the 2 vaccines. So you got to separate what the CDC says in terms of what they think is best for public health right now versus the actual science.
One more before you go, Doctor. You've probably heard, because I have, vaccinated people say, listen, I'm not being selfish here. I got the shot. Why should I care if someone else does or doesn't? That's up to them. What's the answer to that?
You know, you kind of see that, like, you know, people don't want to wear their seat belts or they don't want to do anything else. At a certain point, society kind of throws up their arm and says, you know, we've taken it as far as we can. The rest is up to you. So, you know, all of these measures that we're taking, which I think is very appropriate, at some point someone may argue, okay, now anyone who wants to be protected can, if they choose not to. You know, what is society's obligation to jump through hoops to keep them protected?
Yeah. Jonathan Baktari, doctor, it's great to see you, CEO of E7health.com as well. Have a great weekend. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a parent's worst nightmare, and it happened. Parents' worst nightmare, and it happened in Louisville, Kentucky. We'll explain more about this frightening kidnapping and the heroic action taken by witnesses and officers. Plus, is a 70-year-old fit for space travel? We'll ask a former astronaut what he thinks about Richard Branson's personal flight to outside the atmosphere. Don't forget to follow us on social media at The Donlon Report on Twitter. Billionaire Richard Branson preparing for takeoff aboard his Virgin Galactic rocket plane, the VSS Unity, coming up on Sunday. Let's check in now. From New Mexico is News Nation's Marky Martin with more on what's ahead for Branson and his crew on Sunday. Hi, Marky.
Not too far from where this weekend launch will be taking place, but this is the billionaire space race that everybody has been talking about for years, right? Who's going to make it there first? Will it be Richard Branson? Will it be Jeff Bezos? Would it be or Elon Musk? And if everything goes according to plan this weekend, it will be Sir Richard Branson. Now, he'll be taking his very own rocket aboard Virgin Galactic this Sunday morning out of New Mexico desert. And get this, the flight isn't that long. The entire experience is only about 10 minutes with 3 minutes of weightlessness. And he posted an epic video to his Twitter feed, and I want to play part of it for you here.
Astronaut 001, Richard Branson. I'll be evaluating the customer spaceflight experience. I've always been a dreamer. My mum taught me to never give up and to reach for the stars. This July, our dream will become a reality.
Yeah, he just exudes enthusiasm. You can feel it. But if you remember, this journey does not come without competition. Earlier this summer, former Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos announcing that he would be launching himself into space on July 20th. And reportedly, when he made that announcement, Branson expedited his journey. And we do know that Bezos is taking not only his brother, this is my favorite part, 82-year-old pilot Wally Funk, and she was one of the original Mercury 13, the women who trained to become astronauts in the 60s but never made it to space. You have to listen to her learning for the first time that she'd be joining.
We're going to fly you up into space on the very first flight. That's your
I can't tell people that are watching how fabulous I feel to have been picked by Blue Origin to go on this trip.
You're going to be an astronaut.
Oh, finally!
Yeah, you just can't help but love her. It's steep competition, Joe, but it does seem to all be in good fun. And it also signifies something big, and that's the start of space exploration and space tourism. Right. And lastly, Branson, in that Twitter video, said that upon his return to Earth on Sunday morning, he'd be making a major announcement for anybody who has ever dreamt of becoming an astronaut themselves. And, Joe, we will be here throughout the weekend to see what that is.
Half off discount, maybe, perhaps. What time is that? Is the flight on Sunday, Marky?
We're going early Sunday morning. We're told to be there from 6 a.m. to 9, so somewhere in that window. Okay. And it'll be live streamed for the world to watch as well, Joe. We'll bring that to you here. A
lot will. Marky Martin, thank you very much for the update. We appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Joining me now, Jose Hernandez, an astronaut who's actually been to outer space. Not a typical mission coming up here on Sunday, in your world anyway. Are you looking forward to watching this?
Oh, I am, Joe. I mean, this is the culmination of keeping up with the Joneses in space as both billionaires take their pet space projects on a test flight. And so it's just amazing watching them, one trying to outdo the other. You know, one of them is going up 55 miles up, and the carbon line 62 miles. Mm-hmm. So the other one is saying, well, he may be the first, but he's not really going into space because you got to go 62 miles and higher. But according to NASA, that's close enough, and they'll be considered astronauts if they do go up.
Right. We do want to share the video that we've been watching of this mission that's coming up on Sunday, and I'd like to have you explain the difference with these two. You kind of touched on it there, but with Branson's, it's kind of a mothership that actually carries the plane up and then drops it as you see it here. Explain this.
That's correct. The White Knight 2 goes to an altitude of 45,000 feet and then releases the VSS Unity. Rockets come on, and then it blasts off into up 55 miles. It's a total trip of 14 to 17 minutes, which is longer than the Blue Origin flight, which is a traditional rocket with capsule. Right. The capsule lands on the ground, and that one only lasts about 11 minutes from launch to landing.
What's the payoff for this, Jose? Is this more, in your opinion, about billionaires racing to get into space?
Well, it's a little of that, Joe. It's a little bit of the ego for them, but it's also, they're both tied to NASA and depend on contracts to keep those companies going. I have a hard time believing that tourism will be a sustainable industry to keep spaceflight for them to make it profitable. I kind of think that the Blue Origin architecture with a rocket and capsule is going to be a dual use to go to the International Space Station and maybe to Mars on contracts with NASA. And the other one, which is a space plane, I think that they're developing for intercontinental travel, where a wealthy businessman can be from New York to Singapore in an hour as opposed to a 14-hour flight.
Hey, before we let you go quickly, Jose, I saw your flight suit hanging behind you there. You were on board the space shuttle in 2008. Just quickly give us the most memorable part of that trip for you. You were in space for 14 days.
Yes, I was up there in 2009, STS-128 aboard Space Shuttle Discovery. I was a flight engineer, and we were the second to last mission to finish construction of the International Space Station. But more importantly, the best feeling is basically when you first see Earth from your perspective. You unbuckle your seatbelt, do your best Superman impersonation, and you look at that beautiful world out there and how fragile it looks, because you're able to look at the atmosphere and it's scary thin. And so I became an instant environmentalist when I saw how thin and how delicately balanced our environment ecosystem is from space.
Man, that's just a fantastic picture you painted. Jose Hernandez, astronaut on the space shuttle. Hey, it's great to chat with you, and we appreciate your time tonight. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll look forward to watching the flight on Sunday.
I'll have popcorn. I'll be watching it, so it's going to be great.
All right, take care. Coming up, arrests have been made in the assassination of the Haitian president. What we know about the suspects and what's next for that island nation. Plus, a 6-year-old girl kidnapped in Kentucky. How police were able to find that girl in a matter of minutes. That story's ahead. It is a parent's nightmare. A 6-year-old girl playing outside, kidnapped in broad daylight. What happened just minutes later? News Nation's Leland Vitter joins us now to explain. This is quite a story.
It's quite a story. You and I have covered so many of these who ended up the other way. And it's so nice to see this one ends up the right way. Take a look at this video. There was a 6-year-old, she was playing on the side of a road on a bike when she was kidnapped by a stranger. This is video of the police dash cams just a couple of minutes later. Witnesses called the police. The cops followed the car, and they arrested Robbie Wilt, 40 years old. Here's him on the ground. That's the red Challenger that he used. He circled a block and then allegedly grabbed this girl off of her bike. Here's the view from the other police officer's camera.
Hello.
It's okay. Come here. It's okay.
yeah, her girl.
Oh, I want my daddy. Oh,
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking.
9 minutes, though.
You could tell the officers were emotional. They were both dads. But the other key on this is the witnesses who saw this happen were able to chase the car the best they could and at least got 3 of the numbers on the license plate, as I understand.
Right, and we all hear see something, say something. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And these witnesses did exactly the right thing. This is video of the police officer walking up to the car. We're going to also show you the video of them pursuing the car. They said they swarmed the area with every available Louisville police officer around in order to find this car, this red Challenger. You can see all the police cars that lined up almost instantly with just in a couple of minutes. Here's what the witnesses described seeing and why they called 911.
I saw it happen. I yelled at my dad to grab the car keys. We hopped in the car, grabbed her by the collar, slung her around, and threw the bike.
Yeah, and speaking to one of the radio stations, one of the officers said seconds felt like minutes. And it's just so rare, but they just did everything they could to get there so quickly.
Well, you know that the time is of the essence at that point because they know what they're looking for. Where's the car? We've got to find it. And also, I think you mentioned in the way in here about how we've seen this go the other way. And fortunately, both ways, really, this is pretty rare to have happen.
Well, it's extraordinarily rare for what you would call, and what police call, a cold contact abduction. This is the officer walking up to the door where the little girl was. Cold contact abduction is a stranger who drives by and grabs a kid. We all been taught stranger danger. Those are very rare. It's even more rare that they end well, and by well you mean that the young child who was kidnapped ends up home and with their parents alive 9 minutes later unhurt. You heard her say, "I want my daddy." The alleged perpetrator here in this, according to the police, went on to state that the victim cried in the front of his car. He tried to console her before deciding he knew what he was doing was wrong, began to drive back to the location where he took her from, afraid he may have hurt her, and that was when police stopped him. So he has confessed in a way.
Well, this is another example of being able to see this police work on body
It's amazing
camera.
now. And it used to be that it would take years for a case to be adjudicated and on before you would get this video, especially in a case where the officers had done everything right. And now we're seeing it an hour later, a couple of hours later.
Quite a story. Leland, thank you for the update. We appreciate it. Fried tarantula, mealworm burgers, cicadas on a stick. What might sound gross to you sounds like dinner to others. So should we still consider food exotic, or is that offensive? An interesting discussion coming up. Plus, a lot of political and human rights issues straining our relationship with China, but should we set that aside to focus on the climate? We'll ask an expert on China next. Haitian authorities are asking for U.S. troops to help stabilize the country as more suspects are arrested in the killing of the country's president, Jovenel Moïse. Of the 17 suspects so far, 2 are reported to be Haitian Americans, as well as several former members of the Colombian military. The search is ongoing for at least 8 more suspects. News Nation's Brian Enton is live outside the Haitian consulate in Miami tonight with our report. Brian?
Joe, yeah, the manhunt continues right now in Haiti. Here in Miami, there is a massive Haitian American population, especially in Little Haiti, a neighborhood right outside downtown Miami. Many of those people very, very concerned about what this means for their country moving forward. New video released today shows the 17 suspects Haitian police say are responsible for this. They had them laid out on the ground, hands behind their back and handcuffed, and they allowed the media in to shoot all of this happening right there in the police station. They also showed the weapons that were used, including assault rifles. According to local journalists we've spoken to, it was a brutal killing. They say the president was shot 12 times, that they took his eyes out, and that they actually broke his legs. And now the news that 2 Haitian Americans are among the suspects. These are American citizens who lived right here in the Miami area.
They are Haitian Americans. One has an organization here in the United States, a nonprofit organization. He also apparently on his website helping kids in Haiti. He was about to run for office in Haiti.
And several Haitian newspapers right now are reporting that those Haitian Americans by the name of James Solagis and Vincent Joseph, they are now claiming that they were hired as translators, that they found this job on the internet, and they say that's how they got mixed up into this whole assassination. Of course, you talk to people who say that doesn't quite add up, especially since one of those men was apparently planning to run for office. Joe?
Brian Etten, live for us in Miami tonight. Thanks for the update, Brian. We're going to shift now. Progressives are pushing back on White House China policy, saying the climate will be the victim. Nearly 50 groups writing to the president and Congress, saying in part the escalating bipartisan anti-China rhetoric in both Congress and the White House damages the diplomatic and political relationships needed to move forward boldly and cooperatively. They go on to say, we must shift from competition to cooperation. China expert Gordon Chang is the author of the books The Great U.S.-China Tech War, as well as The Coming Collapse of China. All right, Gordon, I've gotten to know you fairly well here on the program. We appreciate you joining us as always, and I can see you drooling a little bit on this one. I'm not sure I can tee that up for you any better, but go ahead and start.
Well, this is one of the worst ideas ever. Well, first of all, China is committing acts of genocide, and we are parties to the Genocide Convention of 1948, which requires us to prevent and punish acts of genocide. This is not optional. So this plan to support China, because of climate change, that's just a violation of our treaty obligations. Second of all, just to just sort of avoid and not think about rape, brutality, torture, killing, enslavement of a population, that just offends our sense of humanity. So this is just not a sustainable plan. And then third of all, this was not going to work. The idea that you try to cooperate with China to get China's cooperation on something you want, that sounds like it should work, but it's failed over 5 decades. So clearly, this is not something that is going to get us where we need to be.
Well, they've cooperated, I guess, to an extent, right, Gordon? I mean, they're the top emitter of pollution. We know that. There's no doubt about that, or the damage that it's doing. But will you at least concede that this should be a priority, even if it isn't at the expense of these other issues that we know are important as well?
Well, yeah, of course. I think we should try to reduce carbon that is being put into the atmosphere. But the question is, where does that fall on our line of priorities with China? And for me, it's pretty low, because China's done a number of things which are so destructive, which actually threaten the existence of the United States. So as important as climate is, I don't think we're going to get there with an agreement with Beijing. And we should be doing work on these other topics like disease and China's interference in our political process.
Do you think we've already gotten as much as we will, Gordon, out of China on the environment? I mean, they did attend the summit in April that the U.S. led, talked about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and other things, and then they also pledged to be carbon neutral by 2060. Is this as much as we're going to get out of them anyway?
We might be able to get a little bit more, Joe, because China's promises are so unambitious that I think that they did leave themselves some room to negotiate. So, for instance, under the Climate Accord of 2015, the Paris Agreement, China has every incentive to increase their carbon emissions until, quote unquote, around 2030, which just doesn't seem to be very good for the environment. And also, there's no firm commitment to cap emissions under the agreement. So, yeah, they could do more, but I don't know if we're going to get them to do much more.
Right. I don't know where it'll go either on this, because John Kerry even said the issues you mentioned, Gordon, will never be traded for anything that has to do with the climate. That's not going to happen. So we'll continue to follow it, but at this point, we will see. One more thing before you go, Gordon. We've talked this week with some other experts on Afghanistan about China perhaps filling the void with the U.S. and the UN pulling out of there. From a money standpoint and infrastructure standpoint, what does this mean to you?
I don't think China is going to be able to accomplish its objectives. They can pour a lot of money there. They have a great relationship with the Taliban, which is the strongest element in Afghanistan. but the Taliban has enemies, and those enemies become China's enemies. And also, China has given such a hard time to India, actually invading Indian territory last year. India now has every incentive to pay back China in Afghanistan, because there, India does have friends, and India has already made problems for China this year. So I think that China just is living in fantasy land if they think that they can actually tame the Afghan tribes.
Gordon Chang, good to see you again. Have a good weekend. Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Can you spell historic? How this world record holder etched her name in the history books. And we eat all types of food, but should any of them be considered exotic? This is an interesting debate. A Washington Post writer who says no got a lot of response. We'll talk to her next. When you go out to eat, do you ever consider your food exotic? Chinese, Italian, Indian, Thai, maybe foods that are foreign, unique, or different than what you typically eat. What about a restaurant? Would you call a restaurant exotic? And if so, why? Would people who do regularly eat that food consider the word offensive? Lots of questions. Daniela Galarza of the Washington Post just wrote about it and says, yes, the word's lost its meaning and now is used to reinforce xenophobia and racism. Joining me now is Daniela Galarza. This has been fascinating to talk about, and I think they must have given you at least 1,000 words on this column, Daniela, because it was a long column and interesting to read. This stemmed from a ramen recipe you printed, right? So what happened?
Yeah, that's right. I wrote about a ramen recipe that a chef lent to us. It was a pretty simple recipe, just doctoring up instant ramen. And I got a number of responses in my inbox saying, why are you serving us or telling us to make such exotic cuisine? It sounds terrible. I would never go to an exotic restaurant like this.
So did you make anything of that? Or what happened when you realized, what made you take another look at this and say this word maybe not be right?
Yeah, I was really curious about it because I didn't know how to interpret that word. I wasn't sure what ingredients they were talking about, because I think, and I had some conversations with these readers to ascertain what their issue was, and in order to troubleshoot them and try to help them find the ingredients they were looking for. And what I determined is what's exotic to me isn't exotic to you, might not be exotic to my mom, probably wouldn't be exotic to my best friend. You know, it's something that means different things depending on your perspective.
Right. So we spent actually a lot of time today, Daniela, looking at pictures of different foods that we were all trying to find, you know, like mealworms and bat soup and fried pig's blood, a duck embryo. And we were just sort of going, oh, sheesh. I understand people eat this, but you think it's wrong to call it exotic?
I do. You know, I think that what we're familiar with is not something, doesn't make it normal. You know, I think that, like you said, you know, some of these dishes are things that are eaten very commonly in other parts of the world. And I don't think it's for us. And when I say us, I think I'm saying people in the United States, people in North America, people in parts of Europe, because that's primarily where the word is used. And it's what I find particularly interesting is that it's only primarily used to describe plants, animals, women, and food.
So does this go for, say, exotic cars or exotic animals as well?
I mean, I think what I was hoping to do was start a conversation. Why do we use that word to describe those things? You know, what does it mean to us? And I think it comes along with a sort of judgment in a way that words like different or strange don't.
Yeah, because you also included in your article the Merriam-Webster definition, which I thought was interesting. Strikingly, excitingly, or mysteriously different. I guess the question is, how is that offensive or racist?
I think it depends on what you're using it for. I focused on the usage of food, and I think similar to the use of the word ethnic, it comes from a place that's, you know, the people that are using it are generally from a dominant white culture. And I think we need to look at the history of the word. Words have meaning, and words have consequences. And I think the language we use should really matter, and we should think about what it says about us and what it says about our perspective on the world. The word exotic evolved in the 1600s from the Greek for alien or other. And it was during a time in Greek history when they were conquering lands across the Caucasus, Middle East, and other parts of the world. It came about during a time when the then dominant culture was trying to diminish the other. It was further popularized by the British and the French as they colonized various parts of the world. And it's no coincidence, in my opinion, that that's who we primarily still use it against. We use it for those same cultures.
So have you heard from people as a result of the column who are saying, you know what, look, I mean, there are a lot of people in different parts of even the U.S. or the world who eat things, and for people who don't eat them to call them exotic, you know, and have that, do they consider that to be offensive?
So that's a great question. You know, I talked to some linguists and historians about it, and there isn't a similar word in other languages. Obviously, the word exotic has been translated into many languages, but other languages didn't evolve a word that came out of conquering other people or colonizing other lands. They use words like different or foreign or other, but they don't have that history to them. And I think that's an important context. But I did, of course, expect the backlash, yes.
Right. There are a lot of folks we talked about today in our meeting, in our group, who use this as a marketing tool, right? I mean, restaurants, car dealers, exotic cars, or an exotic restaurant. Is this still something you think they should reconsider?
I can't speak to the car usage. I truly don't understand it, but I can.
Well, it's really the same thing, though, Danielle. It's a different car or something that maybe that you don't see often, things like that. And that's where I guess people are having a hard time translating that from a car or an animal to food.
Well, I definitely think it's different when it's translated, when it's used against a person or used against something that we consume. I think that the way we describe food is really important because it says a lot about how we see that culture. I understand that a lot of people are using it in a positive light. I think that was most of the criticism I was getting, is that people are saying, well, I love exotic things. I love exotic plants and flowers and people. But I think that we need to think about what that means. Why do we like that? Why do we use that word and not a
Well, again, it's been an interesting debate for us in our group today. And Daniela Galarza of the Washington Post, we appreciate you joining us to talk about it on the air tonight. Have a good weekend.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
You bet. Take care. A gift from home with none of the hassle, how a veteran-owned business is making it easy for families of service members to send care packages. Don't forget, you can follow us on social media at the Donlon Report on Twitter. Well, if you've ever been away from home for an extended period of time, you know how nice it is to get a care package, whether it's maybe some beef jerky or just a letter from mom. Simple pleasures can make the time away that much easier. And those serving abroad in the military certainly know that better than anyone. But what to send and how to send it, well, that can be a little tricky, which is why our next guest started a company dedicated to making that process hassle-free, a care package that works in a lot of different ways. So let's welcome our guest now. This is Jack Ray. And Jack, tell us a little bit about Hero Care Packages and why you decided to maybe give this process an upgrade.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me. You know, I saw in the military firsthand kind of how important care packages were. And, you know, we would be out at sea. I was in the Navy for 4 years. We'd be out at sea for months at a time. And rather than go out in some foreign port, guys would stand in line for hours waiting for care packages. And you know, as elated as I was to get them, it broke my heart to see my sailors who didn't receive care packages.
Yeah. And
I didn't realize how hard it was to send a care package until I got out of the Navy and I started sending care packages to friends and family who were still in the service. And I saw it's really hard. You have to, you know, get all the items, go down to the post office, fill out complicated customs forms. And I was a military veteran and I was struggling with the process. And so I looked for a company that did what Hero Care Packages does, that would take the hassle out of the process, and it didn't exist. And I said, that's crazy. It needs to exist, so I started Hero Care Packages.
So how do you take the hassle out? You pick everything that goes in, right? So people don't have to worry about that. And then you also take care of the shipping as well, right?
Sure. We take care of shipping and customs. You know, the military discount shipping, for example, at USPS, if you were to go down there, is $20. And so, we can really greatly reduce shipping costs, pass that on to the customer. And the real value is that we're a veteran-run service that's curating high-quality items for the recipient. Less than 1% of people have served in the military. And so for the other 99%, they don't know what to send. And they don't know that, you can't send baby wipes to someone out on a Navy ship because it gets clogged in the ship's plumbing, or, that you should send smaller things rather than big, large items. And so we're kind of trying to make sure that we can help you through that process.
And there are a lot of different cost options as well, and sizes of these care packages. Talk about some of those options.
Sure. I mean, sometimes people can build their own items off of the website. Right now we're actually doing a whole revamp on the website and creating a customized build your own package. But we find that people don't really come to us to build their own care package. They want our expertise. And so we have packages that range from $40 up to hundreds of dollars, which people will often send. We call it the troop package. It'll go to someone that they know that's deployed, and they share those items with their fellow sailors or soldiers who didn't receive a care package.
I'm wondering what you've heard, Jack, from not only the military personnel who get these care packages, but the people who send them as well. What it means to both sides.
Yeah, so much of the care package process, we try to make it as personalized as possible, because that's really what it is. It's the letter that you write that matters more than anything. And movies don't get a lot right about the military, but one thing they do get right is that when you get that letter from home, you read it and reread it over and over, and it's different than getting an email. And so that's really important. And sometimes we get, responses from people, and that's really what, keeps me going doing this is, people saying, I received one of these and it was a low point in deployment and it just really made my day, and thank you,
Yeah.
It warms my heart, and we get those a lot. And the people who send it just love that it's easy, because it's a very hard process, and you wouldn't know that it was hard. You think, oh, you're just sending a box of goodies to someone.
Right.
It's more complicated than you'd think.
Fantastic. Jack Ray, Hero Care Packages. Jack, thanks for your time. Thanks for what you're doing for the troops. Have a great weekend.
Thanks so much, Joe.
We want to turn to our bite of the night now. A 14-year-old made history at the Scripps National Spelling Bee last night when Zaila Avantgarde read out the correct spelling for Mariah. I can't even pronounce it.
Murraya. That is correct.
I love the twirl and the jump there. Zaila becomes the first African-American to win the bee in its 96-year history. And this isn't the first time she's made headlines. She holds 3 Guinness World Records for dribbling, bouncing, and juggling basketball. She is a star, quite the hooper. Look at that. We will be seeing more from her, no question, down the road. Congratulations. A great way to wrap it up for the week. Marnie and Albert are next. Have a wonderful weekend.